Everyone knows the SSPX verdict. Almost nobody has read the complaint. You can reject the SSPX's recent consecrations and still owe its 5 principal grievances an honest hearing. By Chris D. Ask an ordinary Catholic about the Society of St. Pius X, and you will get the verdict at once. Schismatics, rebels, the people who could not accept Vatican II because they are sentimental about Latin. Ask the same Catholic to state what the Society actually objects to, one sentence per objection, and the conversation usually ends. Online, the contempt is often strongest among those least able to explain what the SSPX actually believes. Even if the society is wrong, error does not make men fair game for hatred, and disobedience does not release Catholics from truth or charity. Before condemning them, we should at least understand them. That is a strange way to run a trial. The SSPX has been publicly judged for over 50 years, and the judgment may even be correct. But a verdict pronounced by people who cannot summarize the complaint is not a judgment, it is a reflex. So this article reads the complaint, nothing more. It lays out the Society's 5 principal grievances against the Second Vatican Council and the reforms that followed, states each one as strongly as the record allows, and ranks them. It does not answer them, and it does not claim they are unanswerable. It claims something smaller. You should be able to repeat these charges accurately before you dismiss the men who make them. A disclosure first. I am not a member of the SSPX, and I think the Society went too far on July 1, 2026, when its bishops consecrated 4 new bishops without a pontifical mandate and against Pope Leo XIV's expressly stated will. Whether that act was schism, grave disobedience, or excusable necessity is a canonical question this article does not touch. A complaint can deserve a hearing even when the plaintiff has behaved badly, and what the Society did about its grievances is a separate question from whether the grievances are real. 3 rules govern what follows. Every quotation comes from the record, with its source. Each newer text also gets its own strongest continuity clause, the line a defender would reach for first, because nothing here should win by hiding the other side's best sentence. And the charges are ranked by one declared standard, how difficult the apparent change is to reconcile with the older authoritative record. Not how shocking it feels, and not how visible it is on Sunday morning. We count down to the hardest. Charge 5. 2 subjects of supreme power. Begin with the complaint that even the Society's critics rank as its weakest. It concerns who governs the Church. In 1870, the First Vatican Council defined, in Pastor Eternus, that the Pope's jurisdiction over the whole Church is episcopal and immediate, that both clergy and faithful of whatever right and dignity, both singly and collectively, are bound to submit to it, and that anyone who says the Roman Pontiff has merely an office of supervision and guidance falls under anathema, one Church, one supreme ruler. That was the point of the definition. In 1964, Lumen Gentium 22 taught that the order of bishops is also the subject of supreme and full power over the universal Church. Read its qualifier at full strength because it is strong. The college holds this power only together with its head, the Roman Pontiff, and never without this head, and the power can be exercised only with the consent of the Roman Pontiff. Paul VI even had an official explanatory note, the Nota Previa, appended to the document to lock in that reading. The Society's complaint survives in one word, also. Vatican I knew one subject of supreme and full power. Vatican II teaches 2. The Society argues that a second subject, however carefully conditioned, is a novelty without precedent in the definitions, and that its practical fruit is government by assembly, the national bishops' conferences and permanent synods that no earlier century of the Church would recognize. The older constitution was not coy. In 1906, Pius VI wrote that the Church is essentially an unequal society, meaning a hierarchy of offices, not of human worth. With the pastoral body only rests the necessary right and authority to direct the Church. He was condemning a French law that handed the administration of Catholic worship to lay associations. Now place beside that the German Synodal Way's own plan. Binding decisions affecting every German diocese are to be discussed and decided together by the Bishops' Conference and the Central Committee of German Catholics, which represents the faithful in a democratically legitimized way. Pius VI reserved government to pastors. The German plan makes a democratic lay corporation their co-decider. Then watch what followed. On July 21, 2022, the Holy See warned that the synodal way lacked power to compel new governance, doctrine, or morals. 7 weeks later, with the required episcopal supermajority, the Assembly declared that same-sex sexuality, also practiced in sexual acts, is not a sin that separates a person from God, and is not to be judged as bad in itself. The vote petitioned Rome rather than legislating universally. The spectacle remains, bishops and lay delegates voting that homosexual acts are not wrong in themselves, and that the Church's catechetical books should be rewritten to say so. Representatives of the same two bodies later approved a guide for formal blessing ceremonies. In May 2026, Rome's doctrinal prefect said it had no approval, failed to incorporate Rome's final instructions, and proposed a forbidden liturgy or paraliturgical ritual. Pope Leo XIII was plainer. We do not agree with the formalized blessing of couples. The national co-decision machine produced doctrine and worship that Rome had to disown. This charge ranks last because the qualifying clauses genuinely carry weight, and because theologians disputed the college's role for centuries before 1962. If every grievance were this answerable, there would be no article. They are not. Charge 4. What the new missal said the Mass is next, comes the grievance everyone can see and most people misstate. The Society does not claim the new Mass is invalid. Its charge is more precise. The Reformed Rite systematically softens the one thing the Council of Trent said the Mass is. Trent defined the doctrine in 1562, in Session 22, under anathema, the Church's gravest doctrinal censure. If anyone saith that in the Mass a true and proper sacrifice is not offered to God, let him be anathema. And again, if anyone saith that the sacrifice of the Mass is only a sacrifice of praise and of thanksgiving, or that it is a bare commemoration of the sacrifice consummated on the cross, but not a propitiatory sacrifice, let him be anathema. Propitiatory is the technical word for a sacrifice offered to God in satisfaction for sins. On the older rule, the Mass is that sacrifice before it is anything else. Pius XIV made the same rule visible in Mediator Day in 1947. The Eucharistic sacrifice, of its very nature, is the unbloody immolation of the divine victim, and its immolation at the consecration is performed by the priest as the representative of Christ and not as the representative of the faithful. Victim, altar, priest, sacrifice. Nothing vague. Now read the definition of the Mass that the Vatican's own general instruction published with the new rite in 1969 in its Article 7. The Lord's Supper or Mass is the sacred meeting or congregation of the people of God assembled, the priest presiding to celebrate the memorial of the Lord. For this reason, Christ's promise applies eminently to such a local gathering of Holy Church. Where two or three come together in my name, there am I in their midst. Read it twice. Within the official definition there is no sacrifice, no offering, and no altar. The only presence it names is the presence Christ promised to any two or three gathered in his name. The priest does not act in the person of Christ. He presides. The definition matched the new prayers. The old offertory has the priest pray, "This spotless host which I, thine unworthy servant, offer unto thee, for my countless sins, trespasses, and omissions." The replacement offers the bread we offer you, fruit of the earth and work of human hands, which will become for us the bread of life. An explicit offering of a spotless victim for sins became an offering of bread described as the fruit of earth and human labor. Spotless victim, unworthy servant, and countless sins disappeared. The protest was immediate, and it did not come from Archbishop Lefebvre. On September 25, 1969, Cardinal Alfredo Ottaviani, the recently retired head of the Church's Supreme Doctrinal Office, wrote to Paul VI together with Cardinal Bacci that the new rite represents both as a whole and in its details a striking departure from the Catholic theology of the Mass as it was formulated in Session 28 of the Council of Trent. Rome moved. In 1970, Article 7 was substantially rewritten after the doctrinal objections. The priest now acts in the person of Christ. The assembly celebrates the memorial of the Lord or Eucharistic sacrifice. Christ is present substantially and permanently under the Eucharistic elements, and a footnote citing Trent's Session 22 appears. The corrected sentence is sound. The Society's question is what it tells you that the original sentence was written, approved, and printed as the Church's definition of her own central act, and was fixed only after two cardinals protested to the Pope. Paul VI himself did not pretend the reform cost nothing. 4 days before the new rite took effect, he said Catholics had reason indeed for regret and almost for bewilderment, and called the loss of Latin a sacrifice of inestimable price. The legislator introduced his reform by delivering a eulogy for what it discarded. Here the defense holds real cards, and they belong on the table. The new rite kept the Roman canon. Its third Eucharistic prayer calls the offering this holy and living sacrifice, and a rite is discipline, which the Church has authority to reform. That is exactly why this charge ranks fourth rather than first. A reformable law cannot contradict a dogma the way one doctrinal sentence contradicts another. The Society's reply is the old axiom lex orandi, lex credendi. The law of praying is the law of believing. Change what the rite says and shows often enough, and you will eventually change what the people believe. That prediction can be tested in belief, not just aesthetics. Secularization prevents any easy claim of causation. But in 2019, Pew found that 69% of American Catholics believe the bread and wine are merely symbols, while only 31% believe they become Christ's body and blood. Ottaviani warned in 1969 of an indubitable lessening of faith. Whatever the causes, the lessening came. Charge 3 is became subsists in. For 19 centuries, when someone asked where the Church of Christ was, the Catholic answer was one word: here. Pius XIV stated the rule in 1950 while cataloging the errors of the day. There is a doctrine based on the sources of revelation which teaches that the mystical body of Christ and the Roman Catholic Church are one and the same thing, and theologians are bound by it. Humani Generis 27. One and the same thing, identity, not resemblance. 14 years later, Lumen Gentium 8 chose a different verb. The Church of Christ subsists in the Catholic Church, although many elements of sanctification and of truth are found outside of its visible structure. The decree on ecumenism then drew a practical conclusion. The separated churches and communities as such have been by no means deprived of significance and importance in the mystery of salvation, for the Spirit of Christ has not refrained from using them as means of salvation. Within a generation, the new description reached the law. Under its ordinary rule, the 1917 Code of Canon Law forbade giving the sacraments to heretics or schismatics, even those seeking them and erring in good faith, unless they first rejected their errors and were reconciled to the Church, Canon 731, Porridge 2. The 1983 Code permits Catholic priests to administer penance, the Eucharist, and anointing to properly disposed separated Eastern Christians who ask on their own. Canon 844, paragraph 3. One papally promulgated code says reconciliation first. Its successor admits the same Orthodox Christian to confession, communion, and anointing while he remains separated. Rome has answered this complaint directly, and the answer deserves full weight. In 2007, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith declared that subsists in indicates the full identity of the Church of Christ with the Catholic Church, and that the Council neither changed nor intended to change the doctrine on the Church. On paper, that closes the gap. The Society's rejoinder is a question a 16-year-old can follow. If subsists in means exactly what is meant, why was is replaced? The 2007 response supplies the reason itself. The new expression was adopted because it brings out more clearly the elements of sanctification and truth found outside the Church's structure. The verb was changed, in other words, to make room for the very thing the older formula was built to exclude. And the clarification of 2007 was not the first. Rome's doctrinal office had already issued corrective documents on this point in 1973 and 1992, and in 2000. A formula that needs 4 official clarifications to mean what the old formula meant on its face was not misread by accident. Pius XII's sentence never needed a dicastery to explain it. Stated plainly, the charge is this: the Council replaced an identity statement with a word that has spent 60 years being clarified back toward identity, while its practical corollary, that separated communions as such are means of salvation, keeps pulling the other way. Charge 2, from cannot on any terms to allowable, indeed desirable. In 1928, Pius V devoted an encyclical, Mortalium Animos, to the young ecumenical movement. Its operative sentence is not subtle. The Apostolic See cannot on any terms take part in their assemblies, nor is it any way lawful for Catholics either to support or to work for such enterprises. For if they do so, they will be giving countenance to a false Christianity, quite alien to the one Church of Christ. He prescribed the method too. The union of Christians can only be promoted by promoting the return to the one true Church of Christ of those who are separated from it, and he attached a weight to the violation. Whoever supports such enterprises is altogether abandoning the divinely revealed religion. Note what kind of prohibition that is. Pius XVIII did not say joint religious assemblies were inopportune that decade. He grounded the ban in doctrine, in what such participation says about the one church, and a prohibition whose reason is doctrinal does not expire with a change of climate. The ban also had a named occasion. The encyclical appeared months after the Faith and Order movement held its first World Conference at Lausanne, and the World Council of Churches' own journal calls it a clear reaction to that gathering. Remember the name. 36 years later, Unitatis Redintegratio 8 taught, in certain special circumstances, such as the prescribed prayers for unity and during ecumenical gatherings, it is allowable, indeed desirable, that Catholics should join in prayer with their separated brethren. Return is no longer the stated program. Dialogue is. The defense's best clauses are again real. The same decree calls the Catholic Church the all-embracing means of salvation, and says whatever efficacy the separated bodies possess derives from the very fullness of grace and truth entrusted to the Church. A defender will add correctly that ecumenism strictly concerns baptized Christians, and that praying a psalm with Lutherans is not the pan-Christian federation Pius XV attacked. Grant every clause, says the Society, then track the governing verb across a single century. In 1928, participation is forbidden on any terms, as countenancing a false Christianity. In 1964, it is allowable, indeed desirable. In 1968, Rome placed approved Catholic theologians on the Faith and Order Commission as full commission members, what the World Council of Churches calls the Catholic Church's direct active participation in the WCC. The movement, whose Lausanne Conference helped provoke Pius V's ban, now had official Catholic members. The verb kept walking, and it walked out of Christianity. In 1986, John Paul II convenes the leaders of the world's religions at Assisi to pray for peace, in his own words, each in his own way. In 2019, Pope Francis signs at Abu Dhabi a joint declaration stating that the pluralism and the diversity of religions, color, sex, race, and language are willed by God in His wisdom. Defenders read that last clause as God's permissive will, the sense in which God wills to allow what He does not approve. The signed text does not say so. By 2024, no document was needed. Speaking without a text to an interreligious youth meeting in Singapore, Pope Francis said, "All religions are paths to God. There is only one God, and religions are like languages, paths to reach God. Some Sikh, some Muslim, some Hindu, some Christian." A spontaneous remark, and it defines nothing. But set it beside the opinion Mortalium Animos was written to condemn, that all religions are more or less good and praiseworthy, since they all in different ways manifest and signify that sense by which we are led to God. The condemned opinion of 1928 had become the plain speech of a pope in 2024. Assisi, Abu Dhabi, and Singapore concern non-Christian religions rather than separated Christians, and that distinction is real. But it is the Society's point, not an answer to it. The principle conceded for fellow Christians did not stay where it was put. Within a single century, it walked from forbidden to desirable to institutionally joined, to papally practiced, to signed as willed by God, to said out loud. Pius XI predicted the walk in the same encyclical. From such enterprises, it is an easy step to the neglect of religion or indifferentism, the notion that one religion is about as good as another. Charge 1. The condemned proposition. The strongest charge has a feature none of the others has. The man credited with drafting the Council's text conceded the difficulty himself. In 1864, in the encyclical Quanta Cura, Pius IX condemned the claim that the best condition of society is one in which no duty is recognized as attached to the civil power of restraining by enacted penalties offenders against the Catholic religion, except so far as public peace may require. In plain English, he condemned the position that civil rulers owe the true religion no protection beyond keeping the peace, and he did not condemn it casually. The encyclical closes by our apostolic authority, commanding that all the opinions it condemns be held by all children of the Catholic Church as reprobated, prescribed, and condemned. The syllabus of errors went out the same day. Leo XIII later supplied the governing distinction in Libertas. The Church may acquiesce in modern liberties when it is prudent to tolerate them, but it is contrary to reason that error and truth should have equal rights. Toleration was a reluctant permission for the common good, not a natural right held against the ruler. A century later, Dignitatis Humanae declared a right to religious liberty, an immunity from coercion in religious matters that continues to exist even in those who do not live up to their obligation of seeking the truth and adhering to it, bounded by just public order. Its continuity clause is the strongest of the five, and here it is at full strength. The Declaration leaves untouched traditional Catholic doctrine on the moral duty of men and societies toward the true religion and toward the one Church of Christ. If the two rules are the same doctrine, no one told the governments. In 1953, the Holy See signed a concordat with Spain, whose first article declared that the Roman Apostolic Catholic religion continues to be the sole religion of the Spanish nation, while Spanish fundamental law protected private non-Catholic worship and forbade public ceremonies of other faiths. That is the doctrine of quanta cura, operating as the public law of a modern European state, with Rome's signature at the bottom. 14 years later, Spain's religious liberty law named the reason for the change in its own preamble. It quotes the Council's declaration, states that after the declaration of Vatican II, there arose the necessity of modifying Article 6 of the Fuero de los Españoles, and records that the new wording had previously received the approval of the Holy See. Spain remained officially Catholic, but public non-Catholic worship went from prohibited to guaranteed. The law itself says the Council made that change necessary, and that Rome approved it in advance. Whether those two rules can govern the same peaceful missionary in the same public square is a question I have argued step by step in a separate article, and I will not repeat the proof here. For ranking purposes, one fact is enough. John Courtney Murray, the American Jesuit usually credited as the Declaration's principal architect, wrote the year after the Council closed that the course of the development between the syllabus of errors and the Declaration still remains to be explained by theologians. The drafter did not claim the reconciliation existed. He said someone would have to find it. 60 years later, the leading defenders still contradict one another about what that reconciliation is. That is why this charge ranks first. Now you may judge the Church's official answer to all five charges exists, and it is one sentence long. The Council neither changed nor intended to change any doctrine. Every Catholic is entitled to hold that answer, and most Catholics assume it. What most Catholics cannot do is state what the answer is answering. Now you can. Two subjects of supreme power where Vatican I defined one. A definition of the Mass rewritten under Cardinals' protest a year after it was printed. An is that became subsists in and has needed 4 official clarifications since. A prohibition issued on any terms that became a practice allowable, indeed desirable, and a condemned proposition on civil power whose reconciliation the drafter of the new text left to future theologians, where it remains. And beside each text stands a fact on the ground. A National Assembly voting that homosexual acts are not wrong in themselves 7 weeks after Rome warned it against doctrinal innovation. A Pope presenting his new rite with a eulogy for what it discarded. A separated Orthodox Christian barred by one papal code and admitted by the next. Rome's approved theologians holding full membership in a movement Rome once forbade Catholics to support. A Spanish law citing the Council as the reason public non-Catholic worship went from prohibited to guaranteed. You may conclude that every one of these charges fails. Serious people argue exactly that, and their best clauses have been shown to you here on purpose. But you may no longer dismiss the SSPX as men whose only complaint is that the Mass stopped being in Latin. Judge them however the evidence takes you. You have now done what every honest juror does first. Read the complaint. Now that you know what the SSPX is actually alleging, are these 5 complaints merely excuses for rebellion, or are they real grievances that demand an answer even if they do not justify the consecrations?